Hello, guys and dolls. Welcome back to another NaNoWriMo live stream. Last week was very exciting, if I dare say so myself. Ren Faulkner, the CEO of NaNoWriMo, stopped by to chat with us, about the mighty middle of writing a book. And if you haven't watched that video, it's on our channel. You can catch up anytime. Today we don't have a guest because it's the strive for the final push to reach 50K word count. So what we're going to do is our social media manager Emily Vanderbent and our literary specialist and instructor Riley Bohr have joined me today to talk to you about the importance of self-care during the final push. And then we are going to do 2 15-minute writing sprints to actually get some work done. And yeah, sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, perfect. But first things first, actually, I wanted to talk to you guys about something. So before we get started, some major news in the publishing world today. Obviously, the Penguin and Simon & Schuster merger is officially dead. How do we feel about it? Yeah, exactly.
Loaded question.
Yeah, go ahead, Riley. Yeah.
That just shakes up some things.
It does, doesn't it? And I think it's a little bit surprising to me because obviously there were some indications that the deal was not going to go through, but with the way the publishing industry is right now, or was the state that the publishing industry was in, I thought that by some miracle it was going to get through. Eventually. But would we agree that this is a huge win for authors in general and the independent publishing world?
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
You never
absolutely.
want a monopoly in any field, let alone like a creative one where someone's controlling whether or not you have access to that or not.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, Emily. Any monopoly in any business is just not fair competition. But in the publishing industry, especially, it's already very exclusive, especially in the traditional publishing world. I cannot imagine how the actual author's pay would have been affected if this went through. So we just want to say thank you to the federal courts. We want to say thank you to Stephen King, who testified on behalf of all of us. And yeah, let's get down to business then. So self-care during NaNoWriMo. The ladies are actually doing NaNoWriMo this year. I'm not. So you guys, how's the writing climate this year? Are people less freaked out by the final push than the previous years, or is the temperature just about the same?
I think it's about the same. I don't think it's necessarily any better or worse than normal.
Right.
I think there's always just like a certain frenzy that when you start getting down to the deadline and your words are maybe not as much as you wish they were, speaking from experience right now.
Oh no.
But no, like I think regardless whether some people are just like different when they're writing. I know about myself that I am a notoriously slow writer. I'm a slow, meticulous writer. So like sometimes I can get that 16 a day, 1,667, I think is what it like comes out to if you divide it. And sometimes I can't, and that's okay. I'm still chalking it up to a win, whether I hit the 50K or I don't, because I am going to exit the month with a whole lot more words on this story than I started with. So at least like in my mind, that's still a win.
I mean, that's such a positive outlook to have, and very important one. And actually, it was your idea, Emily, to dedicate this live stream to the importance of self-care, and I really appreciate it. So, in that spirit, what do you do to demonstrate self-care during these tough hours, days, weeks?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends, because I think there's sort of like 2 levels to self-care, at least how I think about it. And most of it just sort of comes down to listening to like your body and your mind and what you need in that moment. So I would say like the first level is like what a lot of people think about when they think about self-care, where you're drawing a bubble bath and you're like grabbing your glass of wine or a good book, things like that. You're doing your face mask. And like those things I think are definitely important, but I think sort of the other side of that is doing those things that maybe fall to the wayside when you have something like NaNoWriMo going on, where maybe you're not working out as much as you usually do. Maybe you're not sleeping as well as you usually do. Maybe you're not drinking as much water, taking a walk. All of those.
Guilty.
Why are you adding
Definitely.
me right now?
Definitely guilty.
I mean, me too, and I'm sure like a lot of our listeners like are in the same boat. But when I think about self-care, I try to sort of balance those two things, where I'm listening to my body and my mind, and I'm running the bubble bath. I'm sort of kicking my feet up. I'm reading and doing other things to sort of fill my creative well. But then I'm also trying to be sort of cognizant of like, have I worked out? Have I gone for a walk? Have I eaten today? Sometimes life gets so crazy that like that even falls to the wayside. So at least for me, it's trying to listen to those two different aspects, and it looks different depending on what I feel like I need in that moment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Very important. I feel especially called out about eating habits, right? I tend to either skip meals or eat too much junk food when I'm nervous or like I'm under stress. So like I think that whether it's dedicating some time to cooking at home or just eating, just taking out what was I saying? Eating takeout. Sorry, words are very hard. Eating takeout. We should take care of ourselves in that regard, because it's sort of eating habits, sleeping habits, exercising, 3 pillars of well-being that people neglect and they take it for granted. So I absolutely agree with you. Riley, what do you do to sort of?
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's kind of like a twofold. You kind of have to nourish, the body and the mind at the same time. When you're practicing self-care. I'm a notoriously bad individual when I am in a creative space. I forget those basic like human things that you should do, like especially the sleep. The sleep fails when I'm in a creative space. So I definitely intentionally try to, get those 8 hours at least.
Yeah.
More nights a week than not. But like as far as like the creativity aspect of it, I try to, not be sitting at my computer for hours on end. I try to like handwrite if the words aren't coming out on the computer. I try to, go take a walk. I try to read because I'm not a good writer if I'm not being a good reader. So it's definitely twofold, that like trying to nourish your physical self and also like not let your mental space get clogged by trying to accomplish this task that is hard. It's fairly monumental, this task that we're trying to accomplish. So it's letting your mind breathe too.
Oh yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you saying, stressing the importance of sleep as well, because I feel like not just writers, but people sort of in this digital era neglect sleep a lot, and they spend hours on end on their computers, which definitely, not to be condescending, but it's scientifically proven that it affects our sleep in a negative way, staring at a screen all day, every day. So yeah, okay. I feel like we have got our things down. We've narrowed it down to some of the most important things to focus on when we're trying to finish a novel. So I would say let's get started. Let's do the first writing sprint. Riley, what are you working on? Still your 3rd book?
Yep, I'm still working on the 3rd book. I'm cranking away.
Woo! All right, perfect. Emily,
It'll be so good.
It will be so good. Emily, still your high fantasy novel?
Yes, still my high fantasy.
Okay, perfect. So to actually emphasize the importance of self-care, I am chilling today. I spent my whole weekend writing, actually, preparing for a contest that I'm doing. So I'm just gonna chill, and we are going to have a writing sprint, and you ladies will then read your first embarrassing drafts. Sound good?
Great.
So
All right,
great.
perfect. All right, perfect. I'm watching the clock. 5 more minutes. All right, are we almost ready? Pens up, hands up. All right, who wants to go first?
Emily does.
Okay, Emily.
Volunteer
Emily, give us some context without giving away too much, without giving any spoilers.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember what I read you guys last, but we're a little ways past that. So my main character just crossed, I say the sea, but really like the strait between her country that she's fleeing and the country next to it. And so now she's got to find someone to like barter passage to now cross like the ocean between her and then her home country that she hasn't been to in years, and she's fleeing for reasons undisclosed.
All right. Let's
so
hear
now she's in like the tavern, looking around the room, trying to figure out like what to do next.
Okay.
And she is trying to find a captain that she could maybe barter passage with. So I will start now.
Okay.
He stood with a few men near the back corner of the room. Each took turns throwing daggers at a poster nailed to the wall. She couldn't make out the figure from where she sat, but she could tell its face had been nearly sliced in two. She watched as he stepped up once more, throwing 3 consecutive daggers at the forehead, nose, and neck, the final one sending the bottom half of the poster to the floor in ribbons. "Excuse me," Airden said to the passing barmaid. "What do you know about him?" "Captain Coram," she said, placing a hand on her hip. "I can tell you he's an honest man, and he's good with a dagger. Anything more and you'll have to make it worth my while, unless you want him finding out you've been asking about him." Airden slid a gold coin onto the table. Wide-eyed, the girl reached for it, but she pulled it back, covering it with her palm. "You'll get it once you tell me what I want to know. What ship does he captain?" "The Queen's Envy," she said, eyes never leaving the hidden coin. "Used to be a captain in some Royal Navy. Now he smuggles goods for anyone willing to pay him." Honest was good, as was the fact that he could be bought, 2 things that seemed contradictory but might just work out in her favor. "Do you know where he's headed next and when he's leaving?" "No, but I could find out," the girl said. Airden shook her head, knowing by the girl's intonation and words left unspoken that if she were to do it, it would be at an extra cost. "That won't be necessary. Where does he make port?" "Last I heard, he docked at Sidra." Airden slid the coin to the girl, who descended on it like a hungry gull and hurried from the table without further dismissal.
I love how the main character is low-key judgmental.
No.
Just a little bit. Because like that woman, yeah, that woman told her, "Oh, he's an honest man, but he's a smuggler," and she immediately jumps to conclusions like, "Ma, that can't be true. It just doesn't seem right." And I think it's great character work. Like it tells me a lot about her without telling me a lot about her. Like it's very subtle. You're showing, not telling, which is great. That's what we want to see. All right. Thank you, Emily. Rye?
Yeah, so for a little bit of context, like one of my main characters in this book is James Harlow, who was previously a doctor, has been away.
The rapper? Oh no, that's Jack Harlow. So I was just like, is that the rapper?
Harlow. But so he was previously a doctor during the war. He has since been removed from that practice, but now after the war is over, he's been called back by special request by the head doctor for a case. And so he's in this scene, he's looking around the space that he has been paying for since the war, in case like his old like lodgings that he's been continuously paying for, unbeknownst to anybody else. He just kept them in case he ever needed to come back to them. So he's coming back now. The walk was as familiar in 1920 as it was in 1915. The years and moments away from London and medicine had not eliminated the knowledge of his old life. In his walk, he laughed at himself for ever wanting what was rightly Daniel's, what was now rightfully but wrongfully his. He climbed the familiar steps to his little sacred space and pushed the door open with a loud creak. He had long meant to fix the sound, but something about it felt like a welcome. It was untouched, and dust had landed on many surfaces like a scattering of snowflakes. James moved throughout the flat, pushing it off the desk, the bed frame, and the small table that sat beside the chair. The furnishings were not elaborate, as they were not bought with his own funds, and the window was dingy, but it overlooked the streets so James could watch the people move throughout their days and lives below. There were a few medical books that were scattered throughout the room in various corners and left open on tables as if they were waiting for him. It was almost as if his past self knew that he would return someday, that he would be back. There were still clothes in the wardrobe and mail left in the desk drawers. It was his former life, perfectly preserved in time. He wondered if his past self had done it all on purpose. He wondered if in some other time he had known that he would return to this place. He silently thanked himself for the small bit of foresight he must have had and removed his shoes and unbuttoned his shirt as if he had done it every day since 1915.
Ooh. He's depressed, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he's a sad boy.
He's a sad boy. It shines through. And again, you're using the show not tell technique very well here as well.
Oh,
I can tell from him going through his motions that he's sad and depressed without you telling me he felt depressed, he felt sad. So yeah, listen, both of you, I love that your main characters have flaws, that they're not really in a good place, because it makes for a great story. We need the characters, at least correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the main characters, especially in a story, they need to be relatable. And the best way for an author to make them relatable is to make them human, which is they must have a lot of mistakes, they must have made a lot of mistakes. So yeah, great. Good stuff we have here. All right, ready for the next writing sprint? All right, let's do it.
Ready.
Watching the clock. 4 minutes, ladies. All right, we ready? Rye, you want to go first with your depression test?
Yeah, I can go first this time.
There we go.
Okay. All right. His bare chest heaved up and down beneath his shirt, each breath cleansing the day from his body. He moved to the bathroom and pushed his hands against the sink, leaning into the mirror to face himself. Staring back at him was a man he hardly recognized. He looked older and tired. His eyes were lifeless, as if they had seen so much that they died before his body. Dark
Ooh.
circles sat beneath them, making him look even older. While only 5 years had passed, his reflection could signify the passing of at least 10. He removed his shirt entirely as he turned on the faucet. He let the water run from cold to lukewarm, and he cupped his hands under the stream and pushed the water over his face. He had high hopes that it would wash him of anything his breathing did not. His trance was broken by the sound of an envelope sliding across the wooden floor. His mail had been delivered. Similarly, in the years that made up the war, the building manager would slip letters under each door. In the past years, they had become small beacons of the world outside, a promise that there was something else besides the hospital and death and decay. Now James stooped to pick it up, confused who could possibly know that he was once again in London.
Ooh. So here's my question for you, Riley, right?
Yeah.
You are clearly writing about PTSD.
Yes.
What is your advice to people, to writers, to authors who are writing about PTSD? Not necessarily maybe as heavy as one would experience from the war,
Yeah.
But PTSD in general, what do you look out for? What to make sure to include?
I think the biggest thing, because I researched a lot, because obviously World War I was very significant in mental health bounds in terms of like shell shock and PTSD.
Yeah.
So I researched a lot, and I read other books that dealt with PTSD subjects. And I think the thing that I got the most out of it was to write about it sensitively but realistically, because I mean it is such a sensitive topic, and it affects each person whose body it inhabits. It affects every person differently.
Yeah.
So it's this level of trauma that you have to like be very sensitive to, but you don't want to negate the gravity of it. So it's like this line of sensitivity and just realness that you have to decide how far each way you want to go at any given moment.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Riley. It was very insightful.
I know. I just wanted to hug him. I want to hug James.
Yeah, he's been through some stuff.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. And what I really appreciate you is for you using the phrase shell shock, because I don't want to diminish the sensitivity that we have brought that we have sort of evolved into in terms of using language. But also I feel like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, may not be as familiar to people, as it doesn't resonate as hard as when you say shell shock. When someone says shell shock, you know exactly what kind of mental state people are in.
Right.
So we sort of sanitize the language a little bit, which on one hand, good. We do need to be using more sensitive language, but on the other hand, we kind of remove the realness of what people are experiencing. So please continue using shell shock.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, like that's all they knew to call it. Like it wasn't post-traumatic stress disorder until years
1980, I want to say, after
yeah, I mean like
war, for
decades later. Yeah. So I mean shell shock was the common phrase for men coming out of trenches. So which I mean is like a very literal term as well as like a metaphorical term.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, listen, it's good for sure. Keep using it. It's effective. All right, Ems, your judgmental gal is on the voyage trying to find the captain that's kind of a scumbag.
Yes.
I mean, not really, but that's what she thinks.
This is a couple paragraphs down from where we left off.
Good. Let's hear it.
She wasn't sure which room the captain had disappeared behind, but she could hear a commotion at the left end of the hall. Her head whipped in that direction just as a young man stumbled out of a door, careening as if he'd been tossed out unceremoniously. "I paid for that room," he exclaimed. The only answer he was met with was a bag and a pair of boots that joined him in the hall. He struggled to catch them as the door slammed shut, and he stared at it a moment more before stumbling past her with a huff. She couldn't be sure the door the man had come out of was the captain's, but it seemed the most logical place to start. She hurried to it and rapped her knuckles on the nicked surface. After several seconds, without an answer, she pressed her ear to the door, but was met only with silence on the other side. She rapped again, this time louder and more persistent. Airden had just decided to try another door when the sound of feet patted against the floor and the door flew open. "If you have a problem, Jepson, take it up with Ayla." He paused when he noticed her. His shirt was half untucked as if he'd been in the middle of removing it, and his hair glistened the dark russet color of stained wood, somewhere between deep brown and red depending on how the light hit it. His eyes swept her frame, taking in her soiled dress and matted hair. "I didn't send for a girl." "I'm told you make port in Sidra," Airden said, choosing to ignore his inaccurate conclusion of why she was at his door. He stood there, hand still grasping the doorknob as he quirked a brow at her. "So what if I do?" "I'd like to barter for passage to Sidra," she said, holding her chin high. 5 gold pieces to deliver me there safely." His mouth ticked with an amused smile as he crossed his arms and leaned against the doorframe. "You think 5 gold pieces will get you across the obsidian? That will barely cover your food rations for the trip. Try 50 and I might consider it. Erden fought to keep her face composed. Unable to steal very much from Dune, she hadn't even had 50 pieces in her bag to begin with. If she subtracted what she'd spent on food and drink so far, she figured she had about 32 left, a far cry from the man's asking price. 23, she said. He scoffed. 45. 30. 40, he said. Take it or leave it. I won't go lower. She bit her lip. Fine, but you get half now and the other half when we get there. She would figure out how to get him the rest of the coins later. Right now, she simply needed to secure passage. A moment passed before he held out his hand to her. She fished in her bag for the coins and deposited them in his palm. He counted them before nodding his approval. My ship is the Queen's Envy at the north end of the docks. Be there at dawn if you wish to be on board when she sails.
Ooh. So here's what you are brilliant at, Emily. Building attraction is how, yes, that is how you do it. My question for you is, what do you recommend to authors who want to build attraction? Where do you start? Do you start with, how do you build chemistry? Let's leave it at that.
Ooh.
No,
that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's different for every person, but for me, I usually go straight to the details and the description and like how I'm describing that person through my character's eyes. So you get the details of like the shirt half untucked, like the hair that's like a russet brown, depending on like where the light hits it, how his like posture is in the doorway, and then sort of her reaction to how she's interpreting it.
So you focus on the physical attraction. That's how you do it, at least.
Yeah. I usually start with the physical because that's usually what people notice first. Because if you don't know someone, you can't really make a comment on anything else at that point.
True.
And like for the scene that you're seeing, like this is the first interaction that she's had with this guy. So that's all really she has to go off of at this point.
Right.
But you're sort of like laying the groundwork for what could maybe come down the line.
Good down the line. Okay, that makes sense. Do you go straight to bickering, or do you sometimes? Here's the thing. It
depends. It depends on what feels right for the characters. Because, like, this captain is not Dune, who's like sort of the main guy.
Yeah,
he kind of just came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
but maybe I want to do something with that. I don't know because he's not something that I had planned.
Hey, you never know. I wrote a whole sequel with a character that wasn't supposed to be anyone.
Yeah, so I might, it sort of depends. I might decide maybe they have more chemistry than like her and Dune have, or maybe her and Dune have more chemistry than Captain
Or
Forum.
it's a love triangle.
Or it's a love triangle. Honestly, at this point, I thought I knew, but I don't know.
Listen, based on what you read and said to me personally about the story, it might be a love triangle. It would be a good way to listen. I'm pitching in here and I'm ripping it.
I don't love triangles.
Me neither. Maybe. It's but here it feels natural. I think so. Yeah. Oh my God. Well, thank you so much, ladies. And thank you to all of you who've tuned in and been watching us. This concludes this live stream, but next week we will be back. Next week, we have a very important topic prepared because we're going to talk about how to actually submit the book for publication. So tune in next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Me and my colleagues will be talking to you about how to get your manuscript not just finished, but finally submitted in the hopes of being published. And yeah, I will see you next week then, everybody. Bye-bye.